Right, the first time I read about anything related to space and economy, I read about this asteroid, 16 Psyche. And it's an asteroid that's orbiting Earth every 5 years. Now, the interesting thing about it is that it is very rich in iron and nickel. Specifically, it's worth $10 quintillion. That is 100,000 times the world's GDP. So to put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of the relationship between 1 centimeter and 1 kilometer. So we literally, on Earth, do not have money to buy this. There's not enough money on Earth to buy this asteroid. But the right way to think about it is, well, let's expand our economy into, let's call it our solar system. Then we will include asteroids like 16 Psyche into the economy. And now Earth immediately is 0.001% of the solar system's economy. But now we're making strides towards understanding how things can change. We're talking about, so $10 quintillion is a 1 followed by 19 zeros. So if any of you have a cousin that wants to be a millionaire, and that's not overly ambitious, they'll just need a small, very, very, very small share of this asteroid's market share to be a trillionaire. And the other thing to think about here is it orbits Earth every 5 years. And there's a spot where it's closest to Earth. I don't know if you guys can see at the bottom right, that dotted circle, that's the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. There's a point at which it's really, really close to Earth. And it'll require long-term thinking because some governments might start a journey of exploring or mining this asteroid, but they might not be the ones that reap the benefits. So we need organizations to transcend a government. So today, I want to focus in 3 main things: the business of space, so what things are happening today. Number 2, I'm going to put a lot of things into perspective, and I'm going to compress humankind, so our species, into a 24-hour period. And I want you to notice the momentum of how small discoveries accelerate technology so dramatically. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how we can make space more accessible using some of the experience that we've had here in the US that's been successful and continues to be, but also opportunities for growth. His Excellency, do you want me to accept you to the meeting? No? Okay. I'm sorry. It's being recorded that I'm not doing this. Okay. All right. So the business of space. Her Excellency spoke about space debris earlier. And I want you to see this. This is our map of where we're placing satellites today. LEO is low Earth orbit. MEO is mid-Earth orbit, and GEO is geosynchronous Earth orbit. Most of our satellites are in LEO. Those are the ones where we have our cellular satellites. MEO holds more of our GPS satellites, and because it's further, it allows those satellites to cover more area rather than less area if they're closer to LEO. Then GEO is the one that holds the now dying internet satellites. They're dying because we all know Starlink has started populating LEO with all their satellites, and the latency is better, right? There's no signals or information that needs to go 22,000 miles and back. It just has to go 100 miles, sometimes a little more, but it's 100 miles from here. That's half the distance from here to Houston. But it's not going linearly, it's going vertically. And the important thing is, now that I want to narrow this view into Earth, LEO has most of our satellites, but it also contains a lot of debris. Now, this is what it looks like. That outer ring is the section that was further away from us, that's GEO. Everything between that center with all those white dots that are moving and GEO is MEO. And we're going to zoom in and look at all the satellites that are currently being mapped by the US Air Force, Space Force. And you're going to see that Dallas traffic has nothing on this. And an interesting thing, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and she told me that this could eventually lead into the Kessler syndrome. And what is that? There's so much debris here. So 95% of all those little specks are debris. Some are the size of a bolt, some are the size of a school bus. But if we continue contaminating our LEO, what's going to happen is that at some point there's going to be collisions that are going to break one piece of debris into 2, 3, 4, or more, getting us to a point where we can no longer leave Earth. So this opens the door for having a conversation about who's managing this traffic. How can you leave Earth? Who's controlling? What times, when, why, if we're having a situation that is increasingly becoming more challenging. The other part, of course, is the business around this. We are going to need some space waste management system that's going to either take out debris out of our orbit, collect it, maybe sell it one day on eBay as a collectible. But it's something that needs to be addressed, and it's being addressed. There are some companies that starting, they're commercial companies. They're sponsored by governments that are looking into collecting space debris. And now there's going to be specialization, right? Some are going to do bigger things. Some are going to do smaller things. Some are going to use magnets. Some are going to just tug debris out of LEO. But it's something that's happening now, but it could, if we don't take care of this, we could be in a position where it's going to be really difficult to leave Earth if we have so much debris there. In terms of biotech, I want to invite everybody to please stand up, please. And I want you to focus on the muscles of your legs right now. Oh, when you guys stand up, it looks like there's a lot more people. Okay. I want you to focus on the muscles of your legs, and now they're engaged at what we know, gravity. Gravity is pulling us right now at 9.8 meters per square second. But if we were in the moon, everybody is trying to lose weight, that'll be, 1/6 of that. And if we were in Jupiter, that'll be 2.5 times that. So it'll mean that you will be carrying 2.5 times your weight. So your muscles will be much more engaged than they are right now, which means your muscles might be bigger in Jupiter. Now, obviously, I wouldn't recommend anybody to go to Jupiter right now for any health practices. But the point that I want to make here is that in microgravity, your muscles wouldn't be as engaged as they are right now. You will sit down unless you want to stand up and keep experiencing gravity. The thing with this is we have a situation where we can understand what's happening on our bodies and compare it to space. So in 1969, we went to the moon, and Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins had to work out basically for 30 minutes a day. Now, today that has been expanded. NASA demands it's about 2 hours per day. And the reasons they want to keep them longer in space. So they make them work out in space so they can work more in space. I'm sure there's like an astronaut making a union joke somewhere in there. But the point is that you need to exercise in order to be able to stay in orbit for as much time as a mission requires it. So in a way, when you lose muscle mass, when your bone density decreases, which is an effect of being in space, when your immune system weakens, we can say that when you're in space, you have a lot of symptoms of somebody that's aging. And when you come back to Earth, you can pretty much reset all that, come back to normal. So in a way, space is an accelerator of death. But it can also become a guardian for life. Because if we compare, like we do A/B testing, basically, somebody like, let's call it twins, what is the expression? The one, whenever you have two people that are like, were born like they're twins.
Identicals.
Identical twins. You can have, invite them to an experiment and tell them you guys are going to have the same nutrition, you're going to follow the same exercise routines, and then one is going to do it in space, whomever pulls the smaller cord, I guess, and then the other one is going to keep it, going to do the same here on Earth. You can compare the results after, let's say, a month, and you can understand on a daily basis what's changing in everybody's body. And maybe we could understand how aging works on Earth compared to what aging looks like on space and create medicine that maybe decelerates certain illnesses or helps us live longer. So maybe getting to see your great grandkids is no longer an issue in the future. Okay, so this is the part that I really enjoy. This is the pharma part. I'm going to take this. Can everybody see here? Yeah? Cool. All right, I'm assuming, I'm going to invite you to do a thought experiment with me. This is, let's imagine that this is the mix of gummy bears, and these are just vitamins. And we were trying to sell this to kids. So I'm going to put the vitamins here into this mix. And I'm going to stir this. You guys see how I stirred it? Okay, looks like Spanish sangria now. So let's imagine that each of these molds is a gummy bear mold, right? So I'm going to pour this into each mold. All right, almost in an accent. Well, as you can see, I'm not a great bartender, but the other part is most of the vitamins settle at the bottom of this container. So when I poured these alleged vitamins, none of the glasses or the molds had them. Now, when we do the same experiment on microgravity, the distribution of the vitamins will be homogeneous. Right? There wouldn't be any settling, right? If there are any attorneys here, that's two scary words, Michelle. But if you can have, if you escape the settling of those vitamins, then you can save a lot of money, especially if some of the drugs that you're manufacturing in space are expensive, or keeping the right distribution in that little pill is really, really hard or challenging. So it's a matter of running numbers, right? Maybe for gummy bears, it's not ideal, but even if it costs you 100 times to do this experiment or this manufacturing in space, but the efficiency is 1,000,000 times, maybe the numbers could help us understand it. Now, I will take a step back there and see things from a solar system economy rather than, well, it's super expensive to produce these, painkillers now. But in the great scheme of things, there are some products that could potentially become take us to the next level. We could start curing certain things that are too expensive to cure here, but are super cheap to manufacture in space. The other big industry is Zebulon. As you can see here, it looks like a map of Earth, but it's a rendering of fiber cable around the Earth. So this is how we communicate today through internet. Magically enough, you can see South America, you can see a little bit of the US, you can see Africa clearly, and then you can see the bottom of Europe and Asia. Now, that big line connecting North America with Northern Europe, that is a lot of cable, right? Today, we use fiber optic cable, and we use repeaters because it attenuates over certain distances, right? It's similar to somebody has a 2-story house, and you have a router on your first floor for the internet. Some people put a router on the second floor so they can spread the signal, right? You need a repeater to just mirror the signal and expand it to the second floor. That's exactly what happens, but in subsea cables. Now, as you can imagine, a repeater is very expensive. The maintenance is very expensive. The engineers are very expensive. Zebulon started as a theoretical replacement for these fiber optic cables. And this is what Zebulon, it's a glass that looks like this when it's being manufactured on Earth. And if you see those little bubbles, there are crystals. Here on Earth, microgravity creates those crystals in the process of heating Zebulon. Now, that same preform, whenever it's baked or heated in space, looks like this. It's almost like pure water. Now, with this purity, the photons that transmit data and information can travel further without needing so many repeaters. You still need the repeaters, but you don't need as many. And there's in theory, the number of repeaters that you could reduce, it's a factor of 40 to 60. So over a length of 1,000 kilometers, you might just need 25 repeaters as opposed to maybe a couple hundred. What else do we have here? Okay. The other area of business, it's space tourism. This is courtesy of our friends from Radiant. This is they're a startup here in the US, in California, and space tourism, for the most part, will be anybody that wants to experience zero gravity, that doesn't want to do it here on Earth, on a Hercules C-130 airplane. You could just live there. You could grow your food there, eat it. You could commute to work in a nice little capsule. That would be the story topper of the year, right? If somebody's working on different parts of the planet, and you have a friend that's working from one of these Earthshine Mini, that's how they call them in Radiant. That's clearly something that's not for everybody, not as affordable as an Airbnb, but we might be able to do that sooner rather than later now that SpaceX is making huge strides towards making this more economical. Now I'm gonna add the space real estate. This is known as an O'Neill cylinder. And as you can see, you can have your neighbors, like you can look at them in the sky, because that the upper side, so the roof of this cylinder has, the idea is that it will have the same things that you're looking at the bottom. This was conceived by Gerard O'Neill back in the 70s. I don't know, I know I've heard a lot about the 70s, so I'm guessing some of that reputation applied. But the thing is that this is potentially a place that we could live. It can be a vacation place. It could be potentially an Airbnb. Now you might think, well, this is way, way down the future, right? Everything else that I've shown you before, so space tourism, Z-Bland, that's a thing happening right now. Pharma in space, there's pharmaceutical companies working. Biotech, all of this, traffic regulation, all of these are very near to us. They're happening today. You might say, well, this is, okay, David, look, I think the 7 is getting into you. But I want to show you this part. I'm going to try to dim the lights. Hopefully I can do it from here so that you guys can understand the momentum. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been overridden. Okay, no problem. All right. Again, I want to compress, this is what I mentioned earlier. I want to compress 200,000 years of Homo sapiens sapiens, or sapiens sapiens, into 24 hours. And I want you to see and notice the acceleration at which one little invention became a whole new industry, made the world a better place, and kept us going. Are you guys ready? Yeah, cool. All right, so this is 200,000 years ago. We're in Africa. All right. We're in Africa. We're experiencing droughts. We start understanding that there's droughts. We are prey to our predators, and the heat is really 7 p.m. 51 minutes and 57 seconds. We move out of Africa. We go into Europe, and through canoes, we get into Australia. And during the Ice Age, we crossed the Bering Strait into North America, eventually making it to Central and South America. At 10 p.m., 53 minutes, 8 seconds, we invent hurricanes. We identify patterns in our climate, in our weather. Through storytelling, we understand plants that can cure and that can nourish us. And we start to settle it. At 11 p.m., 26 minutes and 30 seconds, the Egyptians divide the day into 12 sections of 2 hours. Starting organizing our days, start having schedules, start having scripts. We overall have a better grasp of how to manage our time. At 11 p.m., 46 minutes, 36 seconds, The Greeks invented the 30-letter alphabet, standardized a writing, standardized a word, and started communicating the letters in a way that more and more people can understand it. At 11 p.m., 52 minutes and 37 seconds, the Middle Ages begin. This is a period of our history of great despair, death, superstition, when we were further away from science. And like not a break. 11 seconds. We were born again. We go back to Roman back to admiring art, of reading, of learning about new culture. The Gutenberg press, people start writing books, sharing their stories. More people learn about faraway lands. There's magic. People start getting interested in others. And then at 11 p.m., 15 minutes, 44 seconds, the Industrial Revolution starts. We create railroads that connect people. Commerce starts being more and more powerful in our lives. Tourism starts. And we start communicating in a much shorter way. Then 11 p.m., 59 minutes and 25 seconds. On December 17th, 1906, Wilbur Orville Wright created or fly for the first time for 12 seconds. 4 years of R&D. This here. Now I want you to take this in because only 19 seconds later, or 66 years, you landed from a very precarious flight to getting out of orbit and landing hours after travel. 66 years. At 11 p.m., 9 minutes, making space accessible to everyone. Countries, companies, big and small, now flying. And just recently, came the infrastructure for us humans. And it all started 121 years ago with two very passionate brothers that wanted to see us fly. Okay. For the music's great. All right. So that's the trip of human history in 24 hours. And as you can see, it's just a few little things that happen, sometimes by mistake, sometimes very deliberately, that brought us to now having internet that's accessible anywhere in the world, that it's not as cheap as we would like it to be, but it's going to become accessible to everyone. Now, this section of making space accessible, and this is the last part, I promise. I just want to talk about a couple of things here of how to make space accessible. And I'm going to use a little bit of the US model in order to show what's been working here. And I'm going to use a little of economics. Any economists here? Yes? Oh, great. All right. Gotta be extra careful now. Okay. So one of the things that the European space industry is finding challenging to achieve is the level of regulation, right? Some people say that there's less regulation in the US, that we're more lenient, maybe. That could be true. It could also mean that Europe is more cautious and it's more environmentally aware than the US, and that could also be true. But I'm going to start with what's known as a Laffer curve. It's a curve, I don't know if you, let me know if you can see it. It's a curve like this. All right, can you guys see this? Yes? Okay. So this is usually the tax rate. This is the tax rate that governments charge for corporate taxes. And this is government revenue, so like tax revenue for the governments, right? Now, this is very simple. Well, this part at least. At 0%, the government doesn't collect any, right? If you don't get any tax rate, there's no tax revenue for the government. At 100%, this is also known as slavery, and we don't want that, right? So you work and the government takes 100% of your profits, right? Now we want to be somewhere here in the middle, right? Depending on what country you're in. But the interesting thing here is that you could be here. You could be here, and with the same tax rate that you have, like a higher tax rate, you could collect. Let me rephrase that. If your tax rate was smaller here, you would be able to collect the same amount, I'm going to call it X, than if your tax rate was higher. And this is because at this level, there's just a few companies, probably very large ones, that are the only players, and they don't make the market very efficient. Now, from a government perspective, if you're collecting the same amount and you are promoting the economy, because this will be appealing to a lot of companies, right? I don't have to pay that many taxes. There's a subsidy, or there's this sort of period of 5 years where I don't pay as many taxes as I would. This would allow for collecting the same amount of money here and here. And you could argue that this is more efficient for the market. Now, how does this relate to regulation in Europe, right? Well, I'm going to just reuse the Laffer curve. This is the Laffer curve. I'm going to reuse this curve, and I'm going to call this industry development, okay? And I'm going to change this tax rate for regulation. Okay? So with that increased regulation, there's probably just going to be just a few companies that can afford it, that are interested in exploring it, or they have enough financing to do it. But with less regulation, you can have a lot of people interested in saying, hey, why don't we go to Ireland? Why don't we go to Italy? Why don't we go to Hungary? To just work, because the amount of regulation we're getting allows us to grow as a smaller company. We all are aware that larger companies can become more inefficient. They're not as quickly, they don't respond as quickly. They can become really slow, political. And this could allow smaller companies to be a part of the economy. Now, I'm not putting it here because we all want some regulation, right? Like, we don't want the Wild West to happen in space, especially if this could affect us on the long run. So this is the first part. And you could argue that this would be a much more efficient way of managing a new industry than this. Because to have this level of regulation, you will need a lot of people, a lot of laws, and this would create an economy, but I don't think it will be the core economy. It'll be the service economy around the core economy. So this is the first part. Now, it's a good thing that we're in a business school, huh? Okay, so the other part is, what's the difference between Europe funding and US funding, especially VC firms that are interested in getting into space? Some of them come all the way to the US because they find that they can get better resources, more talent, but some companies move to the US because the checks are larger too. So I'm gonna say check size, this is basically the amount of the investment. And then this is risk tolerance. Now, I think Europe is here, and I think the US is here. And this is a well-known fact. Check sizes for VCs, from VCs in Europe are like half, sometimes a third the size than in the US. And the risk tolerance is also lower. Now, it doesn't have, it's not a cultural thing, right? We can either go up here and increase the check sizes by promoting this to governments, through the governments, or we can reduce or increase the risk tolerance, telling people that, space is the next best thing, let's do it. But so this will eventually get us into this quadrant where our risk tolerance is higher, understanding that this is a space, this is untapped territory, and the check sizes are bigger. Now, how do we get there? I think there's one solution, and this is based in the US model for space development. And it's fairly straightforward. This is the government, and these are private companies. This is the model that has made smaller companies become big. The government has defense needs, has telecommunication needs, they have research needs. And there's private companies that are developing things that are not exactly what the government wants, but they overlap heavily. And so the government, through NASA or the DoD or the Department of Air Force, say, hey, let's bid this to the market, because we know there's a couple of companies sending satellites or sending rockets or having Earth observation from LEO or MEO or GEO. Why don't we bid this? Because that intellectual property we can use for our needs. And so you can get a very nice contract from 1 million to 33 million to 66 million. Just overlapping and understanding that there are certain things that you can do that the government will pay you for. And it's kind of like giving somebody a ride, like the government is telling you, hey, if you hitchhike me to the next block, I'll pay you, $5. You're already making the trip. Might as well have those $5 and have extra gas to make more blocks in your path. So this is, again, high level, but I think that these are elements that we should really, really grasp. The amount of regulation that is being considered in Europe sometimes could deter companies to start working there. That's why there's European companies coming to the US. Now, on the other side, there's talent. A lot of talent is working remotely, not perfectly, but they're trying to get into the US economy because it's more attractive to work at well-funded companies that allow them to see in a period of 2 or 3 years what their work translates into, as opposed to going through a lot of regulation that might take a decade. And by then, you will nostalgically look back at that company and say, like, I worked there for a year, but I didn't see anything So as an engineer or as a business developer, I want to see some traction. And that overlapping, it's really important. Engineers, they know they're in demand too. So if they're able to have a project they can own and they can see inside of a period of like 4 or 5 years, that could be really, really interesting for talent as well, to just stay in Europe or even take it to Europe. And so to put it all together, today we spoke about the business or the businesses that we're seeing in space today. We talked a little bit about what those businesses could become, like space real estate. We saw the momentum that little things and tweaks in our experience as a humankind can have in our technology. And we also spoke briefly about certain aspects to make space accessible to everyone, especially thinking of the American model that's worked really well for the US. So to close, my idea around this is to just start a conversation around these aspects, add a little layer of regulation that I might not be aware of, add a little layer of culture, but just think that there are certain things that we can manage and that there's definitely space for everyone. We just need to facilitate it and make it happen. Thank you.